Back when I still lived with my parents in Indiana, whenever my mom told me it was my turn to cook dinner, and I didn't already have something marinating in the fridge or planned out in general, I would generally fall back onto making rice bowls. One, because they're really easy to put together, and two, the basic sauce and formula is super versatile and can be applied to pretty much any protein and or vegetable. If you just want to jump straight to learning this incredibly versatile recipe, you can skip to it at this timestamp. Otherwise, let's talk again. When you look up recipes for rice bowls online, you'll generally find that they're specific to a certain ingredient, such as chicken and egg, fried pork cutlets, or thinly sliced beef. However, just like I explained in my previous video on Sichuan cuisine, all of these popular rice bowl recipes will always have the same 4 ingredients for the basic sauce and flavor profile, namely soy sauce, sugar, mirin, and sake, or in other words, teriyaki sauce. That's right. You can easily replicate the flavor of pre-made store-bought teriyaki with only 4 basic components, and you don't have to deal with high fructose corn syrup or absurd amounts of sugar, since you can control the ratios, just like you could control the ratios of the danjamian sauce to your personal tastes. And just like the danjamian sauce, the soy sauce and sugar provide the salty and sweet taste modalities, but unlike Sichuan cuisine, Japanese cuisine usually avoids overly spicy or overly acidic components. The mirin and sake provide very similar purposes to this flavor profile, as they're both sweet rice wines with some slight acidity, with the mirin having a higher sugar content and lower alcohol content when compared to the sake. Honestly, you probably don't need both of them when making something like this, but for the sake of the video, I have them both. Experiment with your own ratios and see what you like the best, but the basic balance is a 3-to-1 ratio of soy sauce to sugar, with the mirin and sake generally being in about equal proportion to the soy sauce. Drawing another parallel to the danjamian sauce, many rice bowl recipes that you find online will also call for the addition of dashi stock, which, like the sesame paste in the previous video, provides the umami or savory taste modality. This is a small bottle of instant dashi, since I can't ever be bothered to make a proper stock regardless of what I'm cooking, but it's definitely optional entirely, and I honestly haven't noticed too much of a difference with or without it. If you guys haven't noticed a pattern yet within these 2 videos, I'm trying to teach you how to cook, not how to follow a recipe, which is why the language I use is specifically vague in reference to actual measurements. I'm a firm proponent of the idea that cooking is an art and not a science, and that you should never rely on concrete numbers to achieve the results that you want. Unless you're baking, of course, which is why I have literally never used the oven to do anything besides roast meat and melt cheese. Baking is a science, and that's why I don't do it. Anyways, aside from the teriyaki sauce components, most donburi also almost always have the addition of thinly sliced onions, which are typically reduced in the pan with the sauce itself and oftentimes the protein. They add another component of sweetness to the dish, as well as some slight texture contrast, although not much compared to other potential ingredients, and in my opinion, they're also optional, although they do make the dish feel more complete when you have them. Rice obviously makes up the base of the dish, and I recommend that you go to an Asian market so that you can buy a large, high-quality bag that will last in your pantry for quite a while. I personally use the Nishiki brand, but any premium, medium-grain white rice will work. Finally, the actual protein or main component of the rice bowl is completely up to you, or rather up to what you have in your fridge/freezer, since, as I mentioned earlier, whenever I made this, it was when I didn't have any other ideas as to what to make for that night. One time, my dad had made some brisket in his smoker earlier in the week, and there were a ton of leftovers just sitting in the fridge unused. So I threw some rice in the rice cooker, thinly sliced up the brisket, tossed it with the teriyaki sauce, and also added a spoonful of gochujang for some spiciness, since this sweet flavor profile can get a little overwhelming to me at times. I added some chopped scallions, sesame seeds, beni shoga pickled ginger, dried nori seaweed, and a fried egg on top. Well, I could end the video right there, since I basically just gave you guys the recipe with that short spiel. Before we start the actual recipe, I do want to make one more quick note on how the proteins in these bowls are generally cooked. Most recipes will tell you to put the liquid components into the pan first and then heat it up with the meat, rather than first stir frying the meat with some oil and adding the liquid components second. Coming from a Chinese stir-fry crazy background and Western culinary principles in general, I always thought this was a bit weird since it's pretty common knowledge that it's good practice to sear your protein on high heat as a first step in most dishes in order to promote the Maillard reaction, which contributes flavor and complexity as well as creating a fond on the bottom of the pan, which you can then deglaze with a wine or other liquid to create a tasty sauce. Generally, when I'm using a raw meat instead of, say, leftover brisket, I will actually do this step instead of just boiling the meat in the liquid components. But ultimately, the decision is up to you and whether or not you can actually taste a difference, which I actually can for this application. Alright, enough talk, let's cook. First things first, cook your rice. Fellow Asians, I hope to God that you already have a rice cooker in your kitchen, and for the rest of you, please order one. It's absolutely worth the money, as they can also be used as slow cookers and steamers, and it's so much easier and low maintenance to cook rice in them rather than in a pot on the stovetop. I got myself a fancy Zojulushi model after moving across the country, but any cheap model you find will be just fine. Now, here's where I might get some inflammatory comments from my fellow Asians. I, and my family as well, don't wash our rice. We just throw a cup in there, pour in water until it reaches the line, and set it and forget about it. This might seem sacrilegious to some of you, but I honestly don't really care about the slightly more glutinous texture that comes from doing this. You do you. Also, I typically use the quick rice option instead of the regular cooking mode, since this model has a rather long 1-hour cook time, and the rest of this dish comes together in less than half of that. Once your rice is cooking, you can get started on the sauce and protein. Slice up some onions if you want to use them, and set them aside for now. Today, I'm using thinly sliced beef, so this would technically be a gyudon, but you can obviously use whatever protein you have on hand. I'll leave links in the description below from my lord and savior, J. Kenji Lopez Alt, for more specific instructions on different types of protein and how you should prepare them in the context of a donburi. If you're like me and want to sear your meat before you simmer it, put some oil in a pan on very, very high heat and fry your protein for about a minute. Once you can't see any more pink bits, toss in the onions and stir them around for another minute, then add some soy sauce, mirin, sake, instant dashi mixed with water, and a little bit of sugar. Stir it around, and if you're feeling like a trendy Asian fusion restaurant, add a dollop of gochujang for that spicy fermented goodness. Simmer everything until the sauce has reduced to a consistency of your liking, which for me is when the liquid is basically completely evaporated. While that's reducing, fry an egg in another pan and chop up some scallions. Once the rice is cooked, spoon it out into a large bowl. Top with your meat. Gently lay the fried egg on top. Sprinkle on your scallions and whatever other accoutrement you might have, such as sesame seeds, nori, beni shoga, and pickled daikon radish, and that's it. Very simple, very easy, and very quick. I hope that you guys found this video helpful, but more importantly, I hope it began to teach you to treat cooking as something that is dynamically variable and that things can be adjusted on the fly while you're cooking to better fit your taste preferences. Please don't ever expect a true concrete recipe from me, as precision is a virtue that I do not possess, especially coming from a Chinese cooking background where they never measure anything to begin with. As I mentioned in last week's video, next week's video is going to be on North Indian restaurant style curries. So make sure to subscribe to be the first to see it, especially if you're a vegan or vegetarian looking for intense flavor complexity. After that, I don't have any specific plans, so leave me a comment down below on what other culinary topics you'd like me to cover. For now, I'm planning on focusing on the very basics of different countries' basic flavor profiles, but if you have any ideas that fall outside of that scope, let me know anyways. Drop a like if you enjoyed what you saw today, and thank you for watching episode 2 of Cooking With You. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.